Okay, I'm going to go on and get started. This presentation will be recorded or is being recorded, and I'll launch it later where you can see it on YouTube and as well as Facebook. So welcome to today's discussion. And this is based on my newest training, Decompress, how to refresh, rewind, and renew in the age of COVID, remote work, and behavioral change. And as many of you know, and I don't have to tell you, but I'm going to say it anyway, we've been locked down for well over a year and a half because of COVID, the pandemic, coronavirus, whatever you want to call it. And now things are beginning to open up. Although we are still in the age of COVID, businesses are opening, stores are opening, offices are opening, and people are returning to work. So that's where this particular presentation comes in. Because as I talk to many people around the country, around the state, in the local area, I'm in the Chicago area, and I'm hearing a lot of concerns from people about returning to work. How's that going to look? What should they do? There are people who are fully confident in returning to work, but there are also people who are very fearful of going back into the office. So based on those things and my desire for people to be emotionally, psychologically, and physically well, I developed this particular training. And yeah, it's just really kind of a dire situation. I've read a lot of the surveys and research that's been done so far on people going back into the workplace and their feelings about returning to the workplace. However, I saw something that was missing. There was nothing there to really help people to transition from remote work, or if you're a student, remote learning, back into the physical workspace or back into the classroom. So I wanted to bring that element to bridge that gap between remote work and transitioning back into the physical office. I did a survey a couple of weeks ago, and the results that I found were similar to what all of the other research says. In my survey, I wanted to assess how people were feeling about returning to the workspace. 44% of the people said that they were fine. They weren't worried about that. However, 56% of people were either concerned, dreaded returning to work, or were going to quit their jobs. And that's the people that Decompress focuses on. That 56% of people who are concerned, all the way to dreading and fearing and not returning to work. And I have talked to people who have quit their jobs because they are not ready to return to the physical workspace. And, you know, I'm not telling anybody what to do and what not to do. My whole purpose today is to promote wellness and to help you to feel more comfortable. If you have to return to work and it's a mandate, Decompress is going to help you to do that in a way that reduces or alleviates your anxiety and stress. So I am hoping that as you all join in, that you'll have questions and we can have a great conversation about Decompress. And I'm waiting for people to join in. And I apologize, some messages just keep popping up on my phone, but we're gonna get past that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the transition back to work. We've been locked down for a considerable amount of time. And I think one of the biggest challenges that happened with the pandemic was a huge chunk of our routine was shifted because of the pandemic. Because let's face it, people spend a great deal of their time at work, or they did prior to the pandemic. Getting up in the morning, commuting, going into the workplace, spending hours there. People have developed friendships with coworkers, friendships that extend outside of work. There's also collaborative relationships that were developed at work. And all of a sudden, the pandemic happened and we had to shift. We were told to stay in place or remain at home and not to return to the workplace. We were afraid to even go outside because we didn't know what to expect out there. And we'd never gone through anything like this pandemic before. So a lot of people were caught off guard. A lot of businesses were caught off guard. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to expect. And we didn't have enough information to make intelligent decisions. So we hunkered down, we stayed home. And that became a challenge for some people because you're home. Some people were able to work remotely. Unfortunately, other people lost jobs. So that's a whole nother discussion of people who are seeking employment and re-entering the workplace. So that's a whole nother situation that people are faced with, or a challenge that people are faced with. Not only are they going into work, but they may be going into a totally new and different environment that they hadn't experienced before with the new job. And back to what I was saying, when people had to make that shift, and that shift lasted long. At first we thought it might be a few weeks, then those weeks turned into months, the months turned into a year and a half, and people were still home. Not only that, isolation. Some people were in total isolation because they no longer had that social aspect of work to look forward to. They were home. Not only were they isolated, but we saw incidences of depression creep up, suicide creep up during this pandemic. So now some people are feeling wary about returning to the physical workspace because it's not going to be the same. I've read some articles where they were talking about returning to normal. There is no return to normal because what was normal before the pandemic, that's not normal now. We don't know what to expect. People are very fearful. And one of the things that most people are concerned about is safety in the workplace. And for you business owners and business leaders, how are you communicating that to your employees, that it is safe to return to the workplace, that you have certain protocols in place based on CDC and state guidelines to keep people safe? Because I read some surveys, some research where 66% of employees are concerned about safety and health as they return to the workplace. So these are things that have to be addressed. These are things that we have to deal with, and we have to assure employees that the workplace is going to be safe for them to make that return. I'm going to take a short break here because I think someone is trying to get in. However, let me let that person in or let those people in. And I hope that you're seeing this. I know that some students are joining us for this presentation, and I certainly hope that you will ask questions, make comments. This is a discussion, so it just doesn't have to be me doing the talking for the next 30, 40 minutes or so. But this is a discussion. I want to know how you're feeling about your return. I also am concerned about your wellness, your emotional well-being. Are you feeling anxious about even thinking about going back into the workspace? And for some of you, and I've talked to people who tell me that they're doing their ADA paperwork, Americans with Disabilities, for those of you who aren't familiar with the acronym, but they're doing their ADA paperwork and requesting accommodations so that they don't have to go back into the workplace. and some are just not ready. Others are not wanting to go into the workplace because they have high-risk family members at home, and they don't want to expose those family members to any potential coronavirus. So there are a lot of things that are really connected with this whole return to work. And like I said, we've not had anything like this in our lifetime. So it presents a challenge of how do you deal with that? How are you going to assure or ensure your employees, for example, that the workplace is safe? And getting back to Decompress, which is the training that we'll be doing, I put together some activities, some strategies, some tips that people will be able to use returning into the workplace. There's also a component there for managers, supervisors, and executives who need to ensure that their workplaces are conducive to emotional and psychological wellness, for example. Because when people are returning to the work space, there are a lot of concerns. So, should you interact with your coworkers? How's social distancing going to happen? Is everything really clean and sanitized? People are even asking questions about lunch. Do I go into the cafeteria like I used to? Or do I just sort of isolate myself and eat at my desk or in my office and have as little face-to-face contact as possible? These are questions that people have, and Decompress has some suggestions on how to handle those particular situations. If somebody coughs, how do you feel about that? Are you paranoid about that? What types of mandates are you going to be having to deal with in the workspace? Some companies have mandated masks, and one of the things that Decompress does not do, we do not talk about masks, whether to mask or not to mask, or whether to be vaccinated or not to be vaccinated. We don't talk about that. We focus on wellness and your wellness in the workplace. That is the focus of Decompress and what this training provides. But there are many questions surrounding going back to work, and people are concerned. There's so much uncertainty still about the coronavirus, the spread of it. There's still a lot of uncertainty. We're hearing from scientists, and things change so much that people are concerned. We started with the coronavirus, which did not affect children. Now there is the Delta variant, which is affecting children. And COVID has not gone away. It's still alive and present. People are still getting sick. People are still going on ventilators. People are still dying from COVID. So there is so much uncertainty about this. And because businesses are saying, hey, enough is enough, it's time for us to return to work, people are going to be frightened. People are going to be fearful. People are going to be concerned. People are going to be anxious about that. Some people are just going to refuse to return. And then for those of you who are in management, supervisory, and executive roles in your organization, that's going to be another challenge that you have to deal with. Can you say that this is job abandonment or not? And I will say, for those of you in those higher level positions, make sure that you check with your attorneys to see what your legal ramifications are in case you have someone who decides that he or she is not going to return to the workplace. And they may have some very valid reasons, and you may want to talk to them. I advise you to talk to them to find out what those reasons are. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that people are comfortable. One of the companies that did something totally different, I live in Illinois, and Allstate Insurance, which is headquartered in Northbrook, recently announced that they are selling their building. They're selling their building. And why? Because 95% of their employees are working remotely. That came about because of the pandemic, but it's working so well that Allstate decided to let those folks continue to work remotely and sell the headquarters, sell the building. So they're not even going to be there anymore. They're going to work remotely. And I'm sure a lot of Allstate employees are breathing a sigh of relief that they can continue to work remotely. Because I believe what Allstate discovered and what some other companies discovered, that people can work just as efficiently or even more efficiently now that they understand remote work. They have equipment and tools in place so that they can do their jobs. So that is something that some companies are doing. It is a cost savings to Allstate, for example, because they don't have the overhead of that building once it's sold. They don't have to deal with that. And people don't have to commute. People don't have to use the electricity in the building. So there are a lot of advantages to that. Other companies are doing hybrid type situations. I've talked to some people who are going into the office 2 days a week or 3 days a week and having the remaining days to work from home. That is another solution to really help people feel safe. And folks have asked me questions about how can they, work from home. They're fearful. Their employer is saying you have to return to work. My suggestion is to have a conversation. Have a conversation with your supervisor or your manager, your VP, and human resources to find out what kind of recourse you have. Be truthful, let them know your feelings and your reluctance to want to come back into the office. And if something can be worked out where you can continue to remain at home and continue to do the work. So that's one of the things that we coach you on and talk to you about in this whole decompress training, having those conversations. On the flip side of the conversation, for leaders and managers and executives, make sure that you have open lines of communication with employees so that they know what you're doing to keep them safe when they return to work. I would even suggest when you're facility staff or if you contract with an outside firm to sanitize the workspaces, maybe do a video of that and stream it to employees. You might even want to set that video up so there has to be some kind of required acknowledgement so that you know that the employees saw that. And you also need to have some kind of discussion on there, verbally telling them what you're doing to keep them safe. So these are just some of the things that we talk about in Decompressed. And I decided on this particular training, not only because I was concerned about people's well-being, which is something that I've done for many years, but how to help people to make that transition back into the workspace, how to be confident, how to feel safe, and what they can do in their immediate spaces to feel safe and to sort of minimize that anxiety and that stress. So these are techniques and tips that I provide in that particular training. And I was hoping to see some questions here. I don't see any questions yet, but I'll just continue to, dialogue and talk a little bit about this. And I also want you all to feel free to email me with questions. This particular presentation is being recorded, so you'll be able to see it again. As I said, I'm going to load it up on YouTube and Facebook so that you'll be able to go in and see it. But I want you to really, really focus on how you're feeling about this return to work. What are the risks, or what risks do you perceive in returning to the physical workspace, and how to work through those particular fears? I think that communication and educating yourself on what's available and what's expected is going to help you, because going back, I assure you, it's not going to be business as usual or business before the pandemic. It's going to be new. Your workspace may seem like a different environment, even though you may have worked there many years. You've been removed from that office for quite a substantial amount of time. When you go back, there's going to be distancing. There's going to be sanitizing stations. There's probably going to be weekly COVID tests. You may be required to show proof of vaccination as an alternative to having those weekly or regularly scheduled COVID tests that people are having to go through to enter back into their workspaces. So it's going to be a whole different ballgame. It's not going to be normal like it used to be. And I am reluctant to say a new normal, because we don't know what the norm is. So I don't want to say that we are going to return or that it's going to be a new normal. You're going into a whole different environment. And that in itself brings about some anxiety and stress and depression. So decompress is really going to help you in that way. And I'll give you a little bit of a backstory on how I came up with that title. It was a gift. I woke up one morning and the title and some of the content were in my head. So I started writing that down. But decompress reminded me of those deep sea divers. And when people dive deep, and I don't dive, so some of you who dive and all of that will know more about what I'm saying here. But when people are deep sea diving and they're down in the ocean, they've gone down so many feet, after a period of time, they have to ascend. And when they're ascending, they may ascend slowly, but once they reach the surface, the pressure that was on their bodies when they were deep sea or underwater is different from the pressure on the surface. And once those people came up, they used to automatically put them into what they call a decompression chamber so that they could normalize the pressure or the environment for the body. Because if that didn't happen, people were going to get sick with something that folks call the bends, and that could be very deadly because of breathing the compressed air from the tanks and the nitrogen getting into the cells and all of that. But decompressing to normalize and to relax the body. So I came up with that title because I want people to decompress. These strategies are going to help you to decompress. It's going to help you to be refreshed and to rewind and to renew, so that whatever's going on, you're faced with being in the workplace. Yes, our ways of doing things have changed and we have to adapt to that. But I want people to be able to adapt in a way that is less stressful and non-threatening. So that is the gist of what Decompressed is. I'm not going to go into activities here, but if you are interested in knowing more about this training, feel free to contact me. I'll be putting out information and sending out things to businesses, but feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, Dr. Pinkey Stewart Success Zone. I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Pinkey Stewart Success Zone. Those are the two places that you really want to reach me. You can also email me at pinky.stewart@gmail.com. That's an email address that you can reach me at, or you can email us at successzone without the E at yahoo.com. So we have several ways that you can reach out to us if you're interested in learning more about Decompress. So this has been a great experience. We're moving into about 30 minutes here. So this was going to be just one of those type of information sessions where I wanted to share a little bit more with you about Decompress. We'll also be doing some presentations in the near future. As a matter of fact, I and a colleague of mine will be doing a presentation in Indianapolis at the EOA conference. So we're very excited about that and looking forward to that. And if you're part of that conference, then you'll get to experience Decompressed. So thank you guys so much for being here. I had hoped that you would have some questions, but feel free to email me or contact me with questions that you have after this presentation. So this is Dr. Pinkey. I thank you all so much for being here, and I hope to see you in the near future. And I wish you health and wellness as you make this transition back into the physical workspace. Thank you.